Hi, my name is João, and today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about how might we questions versus sprint questions, or as AJ&Smart puts it, can we questions. So there's a little bit of confusion around this. There's been several questions here in the Facebook group. Also, I keep getting this again and again from students that I have at the university, also with corporation training and so on. So I decided to make this video just to share how we actually approach it at the university and also in my corporate training with Academy, and how we decided to tweak this a little bit to make it, we hope, more clear. What you usually see is that when we go into the 2-year goal, and then we have to start doing the sprint questions, and by using the format can we, things can get a little bit complicated, because then people start to get confused. It happened to me, it's the same thing. In the start I was like, why? It was can we, how might we? This kind of sounds the same. This is very confusing. So to bring a little bit of order to this, I would like to use a concrete example. Of course it's made up, but just go with me. So let's start from the 2-year goal. Let's say that we are AJ&Smart, and we have a statement that looks something like this. So in 2 years' time, each one of the AJ&Smart Design Sprint online course graduates will have brought in at least one more student. In other words, all of us who took this course here online would actually have invited someone else to join the course. We have this 2-year goal, and this 2-year goal is actually our north, right? So this is where we want to go, ideally. But we kind of need to know if we are in the right direction or not, right? So we need to, okay, we know we want to go north, but should we take this road or this other road? Are we actually facing north? So this is where the sprint questions come in. And the way that we build them is by focusing on what did not work. So it's kind of a forward-thinking exercise, again, like the 2-year goal is very similar, where you're thinking, okay, it's 2 years from now, or maybe even before those 2 years, why did we fail, right? So the question is, let's assume we are there now, 2 years from now, this didn't work. People didn't actually invite other people in. Students didn't bring more students. We failed. Why did we fail? So we like to call this, at the university and at Academy, the post-mortem exercise. So the first part of the exercise is to do this reflection and just write very simply per post-it each person, we failed to reach our goal because, and then write down the reason. Then that we have our we failed because, we want to turn this into a question, okay? And what we like to do is to not use the format can we, because it confuses people, right? How might we, can we, sounds the same. So what we ended up with is, are we able to? And we've tested this out many times, and it's been working really, really well. For example, if we have, let's say, we failed because people didn't feel incentivized enough to invite other people, right? We as AJ&Smart weren't able to actually give them enough incentive for them to invite others. Then we can say, are we able to create meaningful incentives for students to invite other students? So what we adapt and we do differently is, when we go into the sprint questions, we do an exercise that we call post-mortem, right? Which starts like, everybody writes down, we failed to reach our 2-year goal because, and then we turn it around and say, are we able to avoid the thing that caused us to fail, like we saw in the previous example. So, in terms of number, how might we's are infinite. You can generate as much as possible. Actually, you should generate as much as possible. Sprint questions, or are we able to questions, should be up to 3. All right? Because those are the things you're really, really trying to find out by running the sprint. In terms of when these things happen, so the how might we questions happen right after the expert interviews, and the sprint questions are defined after the 2-year goal. We build them in the way that we are trying to find out why we didn't reach that 2-year goal, okay? And together, the 2-year goal And these sprint questions, they are our compass. They will guide us through the entire process.
But this, our compass, is unique.
Unique here having the meaning of broken.
True enough, this compass does not point north.
Where does it point?
It points to the thing you want most in this world.
We'll always come back to them. When we are making our solutions, when we are designing our storyboard, we keep coming back to them. The phrasing is also different, and we exchange much more split, right? So instead of just having how might we versus can we have how might we versus are we able to. So the last point that I want to touch before we wrap this up is in the difference between the way we answer how might we questions and sprint questions, or are we able to questions. So the how might we questions, we answer mainly through our concept creation, right? So we have how might we's, then we vote them, then we eventually draw a map, we choose a target area for that map. And when we go into concept design, right, when we're doing our alone together solutions, we have these questions in the back of our heads, and we're doing our best to try to answer them through our solutions. The are we able to questions or sprint questions are also present at that stage. So they're also in the back of our heads. We're trying to answer them as well through our concepts. But they will go with us all the way until the user testing. And that's really where we are going to try to get answers to our sprint questions. So the sprint questions and the 2-year goal are always there, always present. And the sprint questions help us to also figure out, for example, how our storyboard should look like, how our user testing sessions should look like, which points are we going to have on our feedback wall to guide us when we're actually facing the users. Because the whole point of this, and going back a little bit, is we're doing a sprint to assess direction, to assess if we are in the right direction towards our 2-year goal, what we want to achieve. And we do that by answering this, are we able to, or sprint questions. And who actually answers this are the users. So when we actually expose the prototype to the users. So this is all I wanted to share with you today. I hope you find it useful, and happy sprinting. Bye-bye.